Hello everyone and my dear subscribers. Lastmaster aka Glaivier for the West is such a great class. I'm even thinking about re-rolling to Glaivier from my 1585 Destroyer if Smilegate doesn't rework Destroyer this April. Glaivier is not typically high in DPS, it's probably around 1.5 or second tier when it comes down to DPS. It's definitely not up there with Sorks or Deathblades as of early April 2022 yet, but the class is just very stylish and really fun to play, and plus you have many options when it comes down to its playstyle. For example, when there's an enemy AoE, you can either spacebar out and then move in real quick, sort of like this, or you can parry. You can also do damage from a close or do damage from distance. That's of course assuming you're using the Zenith class engraving. I'm not sure if that's what it will be translated to, but we'll just call it Zenith here, and it's the one that uses both stances. Basically, how her identity works is her stances have these buffs, right? When you switch over from red to blue, you get 10% attack speed, 15% crit rate, and 10% damage buff. When you switch over from blue to red, you get movement speed 15%, 10% damage, and on top of that, you get 25% crit damage buff. It would be easier for you to think blue stance is crit rate and red stance is crit damage. Now, what specialization does for this Glaivier is that it will buff all these identity buffs by these numbers in green. For example, it says with about 1700 spec, it buffs my stance buff by 127%. That means these buffs are buffed again to these numbers. Let me show you real quick. You can see the crit damage buff increasing to 363%. At the same time, you can see the crit rate switching to 93%. So specialization is #1 priority stat for a Glaivier. And then you can either go swiftness or crit for the secondary stat. I'll explain both builds in the video, but let's start with the more commonly used spec and swiftness build. The reason why this build is more commonly used is because of these two skills and its tripods. They have tripods that gives you 100% crit rate on these main two DPS skills from the red stance. That would be the third one for this skill, and this tripod for this skill. Which is why with even with 0 critical stats, you can still get so much crit rate with Glaivier and use keen blunt engraving. Does that mean blue stance is weak? Not really. Blue stance is actually where you get most of the damage from. The meta in Korea is shifting towards 2 red and 5 blue skills currently because people decided not to use these two skills. This one and this one. And by the way, I'll be calling the skills this skill and this skill and that skill, as I absolutely have no clue how they will be translated for the Western version. It can be a bit frustrating for you, but please understand, I think Smilegate sort of got the names from old martial art fighting anime or manga or manhwa. Anyways, back to the two useless red skills. They look like they can do big damage, but it just lacks utility and it just lacks something. The truth is, this is a holding skill you won't use unless you want to use the all-out attack engraving, which looks like this. And this is a charging skill which you have to hit from a certain distance for crit rate and damage buff. So what you have to do is something like this. And the thing is, you have to do this kind of stuff for, unnecessary spacebar, and it's not even that strong. Now, let's move on to the blue skills. This is the most important skill for Glaivier. Party crit rate of 18%. And this is the main DPS skill from blue stance. There are two ways you can go with this skill. This tripod will make it easier for you to prepare other skills. Sort of like this. Or you can use this tripod for about 20% more damage. And then this skill is the next top DPS skill from the blue stance, which you have to take because it's not only main source of gaining the identity, but also a pretty strong skill which also has a lot of stagger. You have 3 different tripods to choose from. The strongest DPS, the second strongest, or the weakest. I use the second strongest tripod, but what you choose is completely up to you. And the next blue skill you should max should be this skill with let's see. The next one should be this skill with this tripods. You can use this tripod for more damage, or you can use this tripod for super armor. Also, if you don't want to use this skill, you can also use this is also a very strong skill. The tripods are pretty set. It's these tripods for this one, and they look like this. Now the engravings for this build should be a level 3 class engraving, level 3 grudge, level 3 keen blunt, level 3 cursed doll. And this is where people will have to make a decision. It's either increased mass, which is most common, but attack power is additive, so it's actually not 18%, it's more closer to like 16%. Or raid captain. You would make good use of raid captain on the red stance, but there would be a big loss on the blue stance as it has no movement speed buff. Or you can use the all-out attack. All-out attack will be applied on these skills. All-out attack. This is also all-out attack. This is all-out attack. And this skill is all-out attack. Oh, and I almost forgot. The ultimate also has all-out attack. So if you're using all-out attack engraving, you will be using 3 red skills and 3 to 4 blue skills depending on how many skill points you have. And this is what the skill tripods look like. This tripod for the crit rate. This tripod to make it holding attack and do more damage. And the bleed. For this holding skill, you want to use this tripod and this tripod. This is very important. This is more stronger than this tripod. And also this tripod for more damage and to make it a holding skill. Also this one for the reduced cooldown. This to make it a holding attack. And this tripod to do more damage on the bosses. And if I actually use this skill, I would use the legendary Gale Wind. And it will be really fast. Now I will explain about the all-out attack build later on when I'm explaining my other other spec and crit build, but I will explain what the skill tree or the skill cycle looks like with this meta build. Spec swiftness with increased mass. Now here is the skill tree I'm using. If you don't have enough skill points, I would actually not use this. I would level it at 0, but I would use this instead because this actually does more damage than the one I just got rid of. For this skill, 212. For this one, tripod 1. For this one, tripod 2. For this skill, which is the main DPS skill, 1, 3, 1. This one, 3, 1, 2. But again, you can choose from these three for that skill. This is a good skill to use as a filler and to fill up the identity. Make it holding and skill cooldown. And the most important one, you must max this out, and you have to use this tripod, and then this one and this for the additional 10% crit rate buff. For the thrust skill, cooldown tripod, the 100% crit rate, and the damage buff. For this skill, which is the one you jump in the air and then kind of slam down in the ground, this tripod, and then this tripod. Now here is the build I am also using. I have two builds, the spec and crit build with all-out attack. The reason why I'm using this build is not because of the higher DPS ceiling and not because of the crazy damage of the awakening. Not because I like seeing big numbers, but because it was 20 times cheaper than the meta build. If I tried to switch one of these rings, crit rings, to a specialization ring, it would have cost me more than 100k for this quality, which I ended up buying to make the video. Anyways, with the all-out attack build, your skill changes a lot. You will be utilizing the holding skills like I said before, and those are the following skills. From the blue stance, this skill, and this skill. From the red stance, this skill, and that skill. The tripods of the skills look like this. This skill at 4 with second tripod. This one at level 1. This with the second tripod. This is a counter skill, by the way. And then main DPS skill with the holding tripod. I should probably level this tripod. And then this skill is the same. I just put it in there as a filler. And then this one, this skill, because it's a holding skill. And then the holding, another red holding skill. And for spec and crit build, you actually use this tripod, and then this tripod, and then this tripod. And this is where it's really different. For the spec crit build, you actually use not the 100% crit rate one, but this one. Basically, it's 110% damage buff on this skill. So it can't crit, or it will not crit. There's a chance that it will not crit. So skill cycle for this build is actually different. Remember how I was using the crit rate buff for the blue stance for the meta build, the spec and crit build? Well, however, because I have some crit stats, I don't need to do that anymore. Instead, I will be using this one very last before I switch over to red stance for a crit rate buff on this skill and this skill. So the skill cycle looks something like this. Something like that. That was, I got a lot of crits out of that skill cycle. You usually don't get that many crits from the thrust. That was kind of surprising. Yeah, that's usually what happens, but wow. Anyways, Hope you're not getting the wrong idea. It doesn't usually crit that well. Now, you might be wondering which one is better. Now, I do believe the Spec crit all-out attack build has higher DPS ceiling if everything goes right. If you don't miss your party buff, if you are able to hit, I think that's a critical point. If your thrust skill crits or not, or if you can get at least 2 rotations of the awakening, because awakening is a huge it takes a big portion of your DPS. And also yeah, that's pretty much it. But I do believe the Spec Swiftness build is more optimal, especially for the Western version at current stage. For more details like the runes and stuff, it's mostly personal preference, so I will leave a link down below for top Glaivier players in KR for your reference. And also in the near future, we'll be building a back attack build with the Master of Ambush, which is known to have higher DPS ceiling for a Glaivier if played right, and I will be making a video about it soon. As far as the blue build is concerned, which is the other class Engraving, which only allows you to use the blue stance, I am not too sure if I will be covering this because I know I will never be playing this. Although it's known to have very high DPS ceiling at the moment, it's known to do more damage than the 2 stance build currently as of right now, but we're not too sure about it yet, so I don't think I'll be making a video about the suppression build. Basically, it's a class Engraving which only allows you to use the blue stance only, which means you'll be more party friendly because you'll be using the party crit buff more often. But at the same time, all of your blue skills, they have either head attack or back attack. I think this is the only one with the head attack. The rest are back attack. Actually, this one doesn't have back attack. You'll be using another skill, but most of them have back attack perks. So you will become a positional class if you're using the blue stance only build. Anyways, that's all I have for today. And actually, before I leave, I want to explain one more thing about the raid captain. Some of you might have question, is raid captain good for Lancemaster because it has movement speed buff? Well, if I pull up this screen right here, here is the movement speed, right? When I switch to the red stance, it does give me some movement speed buff. However, when I switch to blue stance, there is no movement speed buff at all. Let's check the spec and swiftness build real quick. I think there is a bug. Okay, there we go. Let's look at spec and swiftness build. So when I pull this up, here's the movement speed buff. When I switch over to red stance, you max out at 140%. However, when I switch to blue stance, you only get 8%, which is the swiftness from, which is 8% from swiftness. So your raid captain buff on blue stance is completely lost. It's not there. So that's my opinion on raid captain. I think increased mass or all-out attack is better than raid captain. Thanks for watching. That's all I have for today. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.